The call came during a board meeting. My phone vibrated against the conference table, drawing irritated glances from my colleagues. I usually silence it completely, but something made me keep it on vibrate that day. Maybe some part of me knew. "Sierra, there's been an accident." The nurse's voice was practiced, professional. "Your parents were brought in 20 minutes ago. You need to come to Memorial right away." I remember standing up, my chair scraping against the floor. The sound felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. Someone else's emergency. The quarterly reports scattered beneath my hands, numbers blurring into meaningless shapes. "I have to go," I said to no one in particular. Ryan, my husband, wasn't in the office that day. "Another startup meeting," he'd said. They were becoming more frequent lately. The drive to Memorial Hospital was a study in suspended animation. Every red light lasted an eternity. Every green light felt too brief. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, and I kept thinking about how Mom had called just yesterday to tell me about their anniversary plans. 35 years. Dad had something special planned, she'd said. The emergency room reeked of antiseptic and despair. A nurse directed me to a small waiting room, where a doctor in rumpled scrubs was already waiting. His face told me everything before he opened his mouth. "Mrs. Mitchell," he began, but I cut him off. "Johnson." I kept my name. "Just tell me." He nodded, probably thinking I was one of those modern feminist types. If he only knew it was because Ryan's mother had thrown such a fit about it at the wedding. "Your mother didn't survive the impact. We did everything we could, but the injuries were too severe." The words hit like physical blows, but there was more. There's always more. "Your father is in surgery. The crash, there's significant damage to his spine. We won't know the full extent until he's stable, but you should prepare yourself for the possibility of paralysis." I sat down. Or maybe my legs just gave out. The vinyl chair squeaked beneath me, and I focused on that sound because it was easier than processing anything else. "The other driver?" I heard myself ask. "Fled the scene. Police are investigating." Hours passed in that waiting room. Ryan didn't answer my calls. His sister Laura texted to say he was in an important meeting and couldn't be disturbed. I watched the surgery board, tracking Dad's progress through cryptic abbreviations and status updates. Finally, another doctor appeared. Different scrubs, same grim expression. "The surgery was successful, but..." She paused, probably searching for gentle words. I wanted to tell her not to bother. Gentle words wouldn't change the reality. "Your father is paralyzed from the waist down. The damage was too extensive." I nodded, numb. "Can I see him?" "He's in recovery. Once we move him to ICU, you can have a few minutes." When I finally saw him, tubes snaking from his body and monitors beeping their steady rhythm, I barely recognized him. Dad had always been larger than life, the investigative journalist who took down corrupt politicians, the man who taught me to stand up for what's right. Now he looked small, diminished. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with difficulty. "Grace," he whispered. "No, Dad. It's Sierra." "Sierra." His voice cracked. "Your mother." "I know." I took his hand, careful of the 4 lines. "I know." He turned his face away, but not before I saw the tears. In 32 years, I'd never seen my father cry. That's when it really hit me, everything had changed. My mother was gone, my father broken, and somewhere out there, someone was responsible. My phone buzzed again. Ryan, finally returning my calls. But as I looked at my father's ravaged face, I let it go to voicemail. Some things matter more than others. Some things demand your full attention. And some things demand justice. Moving back into my childhood home felt like stepping into a time capsule. Everything was exactly as Mom had left it, her gardening magazine still open on the coffee table, her coffee mug unwashed in the sink. I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it. "This is completely unnecessary," Martha said, inspecting the living room like she was conducting a health inspection. "There are excellent care facilities that specialize in cases like Tom's." I continued unpacking medical supplies, refusing to look at my mother-in-law. "Dad's coming home tomorrow. The decision's been made. Ryan tells me you're taking a leave of absence from work." Her voice dripped with disapproval. "That seems rather impulsive." The bandages in my hands crinkled as I gripped them tighter. "Someone needs to be here." "And that someone has to be you?" Laura chimed in from the doorway, arms crossed. "What about your marriage? Ryan's at such a crucial point with his startup." I straightened up, facing them both. "Ryan understands." "Does he?" Martha's perfectly manicured nails drummed against her designer purse. "Because he mentioned you haven't been home in 3 days. I'd been at the hospital with my father, who just lost his wife and the use of his legs." "Where has Ryan been?" The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Laura shifted uncomfortably, but Martha held my gaze with steel in her eyes. "Business meetings," she said finally. "Important ones. The kind that secure your comfortable lifestyle." My phone buzzed, the hospital calling about Dad's discharge tomorrow. I answered it, turning my back on both women. As I discussed medications and care schedules, I heard them whispering behind me. Probably plotting their next assault on my life choices. After I hung up, Martha cleared her throat. "We're having a family dinner next Sunday. The investors will be there. Ryan needs you present. I can't leave Dad alone that long." "Hire a nurse for the evening," Laura suggested, as if it were that simple. As if Dad wasn't still calling out for Mom in his sleep. "I'll think about it." I wouldn't. They left eventually, their disapproval lingering like cheap perfume. I was scrubbing Mom's coffee mug when Ryan finally showed up, looking exhausted in his rumpled suit. "They mean well," he said, loosening his tie. "They're just worried about us. They're worried about appearances." I put the mug back in the sink, still unwashed. "Where were you today?" "Meetings. The series of funding is almost secured." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "Sierra, come on. Don't be like this." "Like what? A grieving daughter? An attentive caregiver? A disappointing wife? That's not fair." "No?" I pulled out my phone, showing him the missed calls from the hospital. "I needed you there. I needed my husband." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it hurt. "I'm trying to build something here. For us. For our future. And I'm trying to keep what's left of my family alive." The words came out sharper than intended, but I didn't take them back. Ryan's phone chimed, another message, another meeting probably. He checked it reflexively, his face changing for just a second before he schooled his features. "I should go," he said. "Early meeting tomorrow." I watched him leave, noticed how he didn't kiss me goodbye. Through the window, I saw Martha's car still parked down the street. Waiting for him, probably. Planning their next move in whatever game they were playing. The house creaked around me, full of ghosts and memories. Mom's voice seemed to echo in the empty spaces. "Sometimes people show you exactly who they are. The trick is believing them the first time." I picked up Mom's coffee mug again, finally ready to wash it. As the water ran over my hands, I made a decision. If Martha and Ryan wanted to play games, fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial about me. I was Tom Johnson's daughter. The man who'd exposed corruption and brought down empires with nothing but truth and determination. And I'd learned from the best. Let them plot and scheme. I had work to do. Old habits die hard. Even with everything happening, I couldn't help checking our joint accounts. The accountant in me needed the comfort of numbers. That's when I noticed the first discrepancy. A wire transfer for $50,000 to an account I didn't recognize. I was sitting at Dad's kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills and insurance forms, when I started digging deeper. More transfers. Different amounts, different accounts, all authorized by Ryan. The total made my stomach turn, nearly $500,000. Something wrong? Dad wheeled himself into the kitchen, his newspaper folded in his lap. You've got that look your mother used to get when she was balancing the checkbook. I closed my laptop. Just some work stuff. Sierra. His voice carried the weight of 30 years in investigative journalism. Don't lie to your father. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Mom wants to know if you're coming to the investor dinner Sunday. Ryan needs an answer. I ignored it. Dad, when you were investigating the Thompson scandal, how did you know where to look? He set his newspaper aside, studying me. Follow the money. It always leads somewhere interesting. A pause. What kind of trouble is Ryan in? I don't know yet. I reopened my laptop. But I'm going to find out. That evening, I drove to Ryan's office. The startup had taken over an entire floor of a downtown building, Martha's connections at work, no doubt. The security guard knew me, waved me through. The office was mostly empty, but light spilled from Ryan's corner office. I heard voices as I approached, his and a woman's. They were laughing. The transfer went through? The woman asked. Smooth as silk, Ryan replied. Mother's connections at the bank really came through. I stepped into the doorway. Ryan was perched on his desk, leaning toward a striking blonde woman in an expensive suit. They jumped apart when they saw me. Sierra. Ryan straightened his tie. What are you doing here? Following the money. I looked at the blonde. You must be Cassandra. The new CFO? The woman smiled, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. Ryan's told me so much about you. Funny. He's never mentioned you. Ryan moved between us. Cass, could you give us a minute? She gathered her things, brushing past me with a knowing smirk. Once she was gone, Ryan's charm offensive kicked in. It's not what you think. $500,000, Ryan. Where is it? His face changed, confidence replacing concern. Business investments. The startup needs. Don't. I pulled out my phone, showed him the transfer records. These accounts trace back to shell companies. I'm an accountant, remember? This is what I do. You've been spying on me? You've been stealing from us. He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture again, but now it felt calculated, rehearsed. Everything I do is for us. For our future. You've been so focused on your father, you can't see the bigger picture. The bigger picture? My laugh sounded strange, even to me. My mother is dead. My father is paralyzed. And you're embezzling money with your girlfriend. Cassandra is a business associate. Is that what Martha calls her too? His expression hardened. Leave my mother out of this. Why? She's clearly involved. I moved closer, watching his reaction. Did she help you set up those accounts? Is that why she's so invested in your success? Ryan's phone buzzed. Speak of the devil. He glanced at it, then back at me. Go home, Sierra. You're upset, not thinking clearly. I'm thinking very clearly. I headed for the door, then stopped. One more thing. I'm freezing our accounts. All of them. Good luck explaining that to your investors. You can't do that. Watch me. I walked out, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard Ryan making a frantic phone call, probably to Martha. Let them scramble. Let them worry. Dad was right. Follow the money. It always leads somewhere interesting. And I was just getting started. The manila envelope arrived 3 days after I froze the accounts. No return address, just my name typed in clean, professional font. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Ryan and Cassandra at restaurants, hotels, intimate moments they thought were private. But it was the last photo that made my hands shake. Martha, Ryan, and Cassandra in Martha's study, spreading documents across her antique desk. Dad found me staring at that photo, my coffee gone cold beside me. "Someone's trying to help you," he said, wheeling closer. "Or hurt you. Sometimes it's the same thing. I know who sent these." Laura's passive-aggressive streak had finally found a useful outlet. She'd always resented being left out of Martha's schemes. My phone lit up with a text from Ryan, "We need to talk. Coming over tonight." I showed Dad the message. He folded his newspaper carefully, the way he always did before saying something important. "Your mother never trusted Martha, you know," said. She reminded her of a spider, always spinning webs. "Why didn't Mom ever say anything to me?" "She wanted you to make your own choices." He smiled sadly. "She also said you'd figure it out eventually. You have her instincts." The doorbell rang at exactly 7. Ryan stood there with takeout from my favorite restaurant, a peace offering. Behind him, I spotted Martha's car idling at the curb. "Your mother's new chauffeur service?" I asked, letting him in. "She's worried about you." "We all are." He set the food down, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. "Sierra, please. Let me explain about the accounts." "Which part? The embezzlement or the affair?" His face paled. "How did you?" I spread the photos across the kitchen counter. He stared at them, then at me, calculations running behind his eyes. "It's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Stop lying. I've seen the transfer records, the hotel receipts, everything. What I don't understand is why Martha's involved. My mother's just trying to protect the company." "The company, or you?" A noise from the hallway made us both turn. Dad had wheeled himself to the kitchen doorway. "Evening, Ryan. Leaving so soon?" Ryan straightened his tie, another tell I'd never noticed before. "Actually, Tom, I need to speak with Sierra privately." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think we should all hear what the police have to say about those transfers." "You wouldn't." But his voice wavered. "Try me." He grabbed my wrist. "Think about what you're doing. This could ruin everything." "Ryan." Dad's voice carried the weight of his old investigative days. "Take your hand off my daughter." The moment stretched, taut as a wire. Then Ryan let go, backing away. "You're making a mistake. Mother was right about you, you're just like your father. Always chasing stories, never seeing the bigger picture." "The picture looks pretty clear from here," I said, showing him the photo of him with Martha and Cassandra. "How long has your mother been running your life? Or is it the other way around?" His phone buzzed, Martha, probably wondering why he was taking so long. He checked it reflexively, then headed for the door. "This isn't over." "Actually, it is." I followed him. "Tell your mother I said thanks for the wedding china. I'll send it back piece by piece." After he left, Dad wheeled over to the window. We watched Martha's car pull away, its taillights disappearing into the darkness. "You know they'll retaliate," he said quietly. I gathered the photos, adding them to my growing file of evidence. "I'm counting on it. Your mother would be proud." He paused. "And worried." I touched the empty space on my finger where my wedding ring used to be. "Mom taught me to care for people. You taught me to fight for the truth. I'm doing both." Outside, thunder rumbled, a storm rolling in. Perfect weather for what came next. The social worker's office felt too small, too warm. Martha sat across from me, perfectly composed in her designer suit, while Laura hovered by the window like an anxious shadow. "We're concerned about Tom's care situation," Martha said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Living alone with a daughter who's clearly struggling with her mental health." "I'm not struggling with anything," I cut in, but the social worker was already making notes. Mrs. Mitchell tells me you've been making accusations about your husband's business dealings, the social worker said. And that you've become increasingly paranoid. I looked at Martha, really looked at her. The carefully crafted concern, the subtle manipulation. This wasn't just retaliation, this was elimination. Show her the photos, Laura, Martha commanded. Laura pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly. Sierra's been following Ryan, taking pictures. It's obsessive. The social worker examined the photos, my own surveillance pictures, carefully edited to look like stalking. I recognized Martha's touch, the way she could twist truth into poison. These are concerning, the social worker said. We just want what's best for Tom, Martha added. A professional care facility. Over my dead body. The words came out before I could stop them. You see? Martha raised an eyebrow. These emotional outbursts. My phone buzzed, Dad's caregiver. I answered despite the social worker's frown. Hello? Sierra, you need to come home. Your father's fallen. The world tilted. I stood up, gathering my things. This meeting is over. Running away won't help your case, Martha called after me. I turned back. You know what's interesting, Martha? I've been recording everything since I walked in. Including Laura's admission about the edited photos. Laura's face went pale. Martha's mask slipped for just a second, showing the rage beneath. And I've already submitted documentation about Ryan's financial fraud to the SEC, I added. They're very interested in your involvement. The drive home was a blur. I found Dad in his study, shaken but okay. The caregiver had caught him before he hit the ground. I'm fine, he insisted as I checked him over. Just got dizzy reaching for a book. Which book? He pointed to Mom's old photo album. I retrieved it, recognizing the determination in his eyes. There's something you need to see, he said, opening to a marked page. About the accident. The photo showed Mom and Martha at some charity event years ago. They were smiling, but Mom's eyes were hard. Your mother was investigating Martha, Dad said quietly. Financial fraud, money laundering. She found something big, right before. My hands went numb. The accident. The police never found the other driver. The implications hit like a physical blow. I sat down hard, the photo album sliding from my lap. My phone buzzed again, Ryan. Sierra, whatever you're planning, stop. Please. You don't understand what Mother's capable of. I thought of Mom, of Dad in his wheelchair, of all the carefully orchestrated destruction. Actually, I said, I'm starting to understand perfectly. After hanging up, I found Dad watching me with concern. Your mother wanted justice, he said. But she also wanted you safe. And what do you want? He wheeled closer, taking my hand. I want you to be smarter than we were. Martha's dangerous, but she's also careful. She won't make the same mistake twice. No, I agreed, picking up the photo album. She'll make new ones. I spent the night digitizing Mom's research, adding it to my own evidence. In the morning, I had 2 missed calls from Laura and a text from Ryan, Mother knows what you're doing. Don't make her choose. I looked at Dad, peaceful in his morning routine, unaware of how close we'd come to losing each other. Martha had tried to take him away, just like she'd taken Mom. Some lines shouldn't be crossed. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hello, this is Sierra Johnson. I'd like to speak to the lead investigator on my mother's accident case. I have new evidence to submit. The game was changing. Martha wanted to play hardball? Fine. Let's play. The break-in happened while Dad was at physical therapy. I came home to find the front door unlocked, Mom's research scattered across the floor, and her photo album missing. But they'd left something behind, a single photo on the kitchen counter. Mom and Martha at that charity event, now torn in half. My phone rang. Martha. Consider this a warning, she said without preamble. Your mother didn't listen either. You won't get away with this. I already have. Check your email. I pulled up my inbox with trembling hands. There it was, a message from the SEC. My evidence submission had been rejected. Insufficient proof. Case closed. Amazing how the right connections can make problems disappear, Martha said. Now, about your father's care situation. A text from Laura interrupted, police at Ryan's office. They're asking about financial fraud. My heart stopped. Martha was still talking, but I wasn't listening anymore. She'd played me perfectly, used my own evidence to frame Ryan instead. You can't protect everyone, Sierra, Martha continued. Choose wisely. I drove to Ryan's office, breaking every speed limit. Police cars surrounded the building. Through the glass doors, I saw Ryan in handcuffs, his face ashen. Our eyes met as they led him out. I tried to warn you, he said as they passed. You never understood what she's capable of. Cassandra appeared beside me, watching Ryan's departure with calculated interest. Martha sends her regards. She says to remind you about the social worker's report. The pieces clicked together. If Ryan went down for fraud, I'd lose everything, including custody of Dad. Martha had orchestrated the perfect trap. Back home, Dad was waiting. The caregiver quit, he said quietly. Got a better offer, apparently. I sank into Mom's old chair, defeat washing over me. I'm sorry, Dad. I thought I could fix everything, but I just made it worse. Your mother said the same thing, right before. He wheeled closer, taking my hand. She was going to expose Martha's schemes. Then the accident happened. It wasn't an accident. No. He pressed something into my palm, a small USB drive. But your mother was smarter than they knew. She kept a backup. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. The voice was familiar, Laura. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. Meet me at the old boathouse. There's something you need to see. It's a trap, Dad warned. Probably. I stood up, pocketing the USB drive. But it might be our only chance. The boathouse was dark when I arrived. Laura emerged from the shadows, looking over her shoulder. Mother doesn't know I'm here, she said. But she's planning something. Something big. Ryan was just the beginning. Why are you helping me? Because I was there that night. The night your mom. She swallowed hard. Mother made me watch. Said I needed to learn about loyalty. A car door slammed nearby. Laura's eyes widened with fear. She followed me, she whispered. You need to. Headlights swept across the boathouse. Martha's voice carried through the darkness. Laura, darling, come out now. Laura shoved a folder into my hands. Evidence. The real story. But you didn't get it from me. She stepped out into the light, leaving me hidden in the shadows. I heard Martha's cold greeting, Laura's mumbled excuses. Get in the car, Martha commanded. We'll discuss your disloyalty at home. I waited until they left, before opening the folder. Inside was everything, bank records, shell companies, and a detailed account of Mom's accident. But something felt wrong. The documents were too perfect, too complete. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Wrong choice, Sierra. Check on your father. I ran to my car, dialing home. No answer. The USB drive felt heavy in my pocket, Mom's real evidence, not Martha's carefully crafted trap. Sometimes winning means losing everything first. I started the engine, my decision made. Martha wanted to play games with evidence and loyalty? Fine. But this time, we'd play by Mom's rules. The Mitchell family's annual charity gala buzzed with wealth and whispers. I walked in wearing Mom's old pearl necklace, USB drive secure in my clutch. Martha held court near the stage, Laura hovering nearby like a nervous shadow. Sierra. Martha's smile didn't reach her eyes. Bold of you to come. How's Tom? Safe. I matched her tone. Unlike Ryan. Her perfectly manicured hand tightened around her champagne flute. Such a shame about his legal troubles. Perhaps if you'd been a more attentive wife. Or if you'd been a less controlling mother? The surrounding conversations quieted. Martha's smile turned razor-sharp. Careful, dear. You're not the only one with evidence. You mean this? I held up Laura's folder. Your carefully crafted trap? Laura told me everything. Laura flinched. Martha's expression flickered, just for a moment, but I caught it. Did she? Martha glanced at her daughter. Laura, darling, tell Sierra what really happened the night Grace died. Laura went pale. Mother, please. Tell her who was driving the car. The room spun. I looked at Laura, really looked at her. The guilt in her eyes told me everything. Mother made me, Laura whispered. She said it was just to scare them, to stop Grace from exposing everything. I didn't know. Enough. Martha's voice cracked like a whip. Sierra, let's take this somewhere private. No. I pulled out my phone, already streaming. Let's do this right here. Mom's evidence, the real evidence, is being uploaded to every major news outlet right now. Martha laughed, but there was an edge to it. What evidence? We took everything. Not everything. I touched Mom's pearl necklace. Dad wasn't the only journalist in the family. Mom had her own methods. Recognition dawned in Martha's eyes. The pearls, Mom's backup drive, hidden in plain sight all these years. You're bluffing. I held up my phone, showing the upload progress. Want to bet your reputation on that? Martha moved with surprising speed, reaching for my phone. I stepped back, bumping into someone, Ryan, just released on bail. It's over, Mother, he said quietly. I've already testified. Martha froze. You wouldn't betray your own mother. Like you betrayed me? Set me up to take the fall? Ryan's voice shook. I saw the evidence. I know what you did to Grace. Everything I did was for this family. Martha's composure cracked. Grace was going to destroy us. Laura understood that, didn't you, darling? But Laura was backing away, tears streaming down her face. I can't keep lying. The other guests were openly staring now. Martha's carefully constructed world was unraveling thread by thread. Last chance, I said. Confess. To everything. Or I release Mom's evidence and let the courts decide. You're just like her, Martha spat. Self-righteous, thinking you know best. Grace never understood that sometimes bad things are necessary. Necessary? My voice rose. Like killing my mother? Paralyzing my father? Destroying your own son? I protected what was mine. Martha's mask finally shattered. Grace was going to expose decades of work. Our reputation, our position, everything would have been lost. She had to be stopped. The room went deadly quiet. Martha realized too late what she'd said, and to whom. Police officers emerged from the crowd, they'd been waiting for exactly this. Martha Mitchell, one began, you're under arrest. I watched them lead her away, Laura sobbing quietly beside me. Ryan touched my arm. I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything. I know. I stepped back. But sorry isn't enough anymore. The pearls felt warm against my throat, Mom's last gift, her final piece of evidence. She'd known, somehow, that this day would come. That truth would need a guardian. Martha turned at the door, her eyes meeting mine. In that moment, I saw not a monster, but a woman who'd lost herself to power and control. You've destroyed everything, she said. No. I touched the pearls again. I just finished what Mom started. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment to speak its truth. The verdict came down on a Tuesday. I sat in the courtroom, Mom's pearl necklace warm against my throat, as Martha Mitchell received her sentence. 20 years. Laura got 5, with possibility of parole. She wouldn't look at me as they led her away. Ryan waited outside the courthouse, his tie loosened, shadows under his eyes. "The company's finished," he said. "Everything Mother built." "Everything she stole," I corrected. He nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I signed the divorce papers." "They're with your lawyer." "Thank you, Sierra." He hesitated. "I never wanted any of this. But you let it happen." I touched the pearls. We all did, until Mom stood up. At home, Dad had spread old photos across the kitchen table. Not the staged charity galas or corporate events, but real moments, Mom in her garden, laughing at something off camera. Me as a child, perched on Dad's shoulders. "Found something interesting," he said, wheeling back to show me a photo I'd never seen. Mom at her desk, writing in a journal. "Your mother's diary." It was hidden in the attic. My hand shook as I opened it. The last entry was dated the day before the accident. "Some truths cost everything. But silence costs more." The doorbell rang. Laura stood on the porch, looking small without Martha's shadow looming over her. "I'm turning state's evidence," she said. "About everything. Not just Mom's schemes, but the other families she destroyed, the lives she ruined." She pulled out an envelope. "Including this." Inside was a letter from Mom to Martha, dated just before the accident. A final warning, a last chance at redemption. Martha had chosen power instead. "I never got to say sorry," Laura whispered. "To any of them. Sometimes sorry isn't enough." I handed back the envelope. "But the truth is a start." After she left, I found Dad in Mom's garden. The roses she'd planted were blooming, defiant against the autumn chill. "You know what your mother would say about all this?" He gestured at the flowers. "Life finds a way." I pressed a hand to my stomach, where the first flutter of movement had started yesterday. I hadn't told anyone yet, this secret was mine to keep, at least for now. "The detective called," I said instead. "They're reopening the old cases Martha buried." "All of them?" Dad nodded. "Justice is patient. So is revenge. They're not always different things." He wheeled toward the roses. "Your mother understood that. Every truth she uncovered was both justice and vengeance, for someone." The setting sun painted the garden in shades of gold and shadow. Mom's diary sat heavy in my lap, full of truths still waiting to be heard. Laura's testimony would unravel decades of Martha's schemes. Ryan's company would be dismantled, its stolen assets returned. But here, in this garden, none of that seemed to matter as much as the roses Mom had planted, blooming against all odds. "I miss her," I said quietly. "She's here." Dad touched a rose petal. "In the truth you fought for. In the justice you won. In the life you're choosing." I felt another flutter, my own secret, my own truth, growing stronger each day. Not a weapon like Martha's secrets, not a shield like Mom's evidence, but something entirely new. The pearls caught the last light of day, their surface smooth against my fingers. Mom's final gift hadn't just been evidence, it had been a choice. Truth or silence. Justice or comfort. Love or power. She'd chosen. So had Martha. So had I. Dad smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "Your mother always said the best revenge is living well." I touched my stomach again, feeling the future move beneath my hand. "No," I corrected gently. "The best revenge is living true." The roses nodded in the evening breeze, witnesses to a story that had ended and another just beginning. Some truths cost everything, but silence costs more. I was done being silent.
I've been wanting to say this, but I don't like anything about you. From now on, we'll live just as a family, so please leave this house. Don't get involved with us anymore. When I confronted my daughter-in-law, who had been neglecting her parenting duties, she openly expressed her anger. The daughter-in-law angrily retorted and stormed out of the living room. Understood. However, the house and everything else are in my name. So let's change that. If cutting ties with you means that, then yes, immediately. The daughter-in-law, who had wished to sever ties with me, happily accepted her words, unaware of the reality. She did not realize that this change of ownership would soon lead her to experience her own hell. This all happened before my grandchild was born. My name is Susan Morris. I am a certified public accountant and a career-driven woman. My family consists of just my son. As for my husband, he passed away from illness soon after our son, Matt, was born. He was a man of strong morals and conviction, and I adored him. When he died, I felt so alone that I even thought about following him in death. However, the one treasure he left me, my son Matt, gave me a reason to live. He was like the sun, giving me a reason to protect and fight. He didn't do anything special, but it was his tears and his efforts to reach out to me that kept me going all these years. Now, my son is a working adult. After studying hard, he landed a job at a major company, making any mother proud of his growth. When Matt was 26, he married his longtime girlfriend, Gina. They moved into a new house, and he started talking about wanting me to move in with them. Won't I be in the way of the newlyweds if I live with you? When Gina and Matt came to our house, we talked over a family dinner. And Gina shook her head at my question. Not at all. I was the one who asked Matt if we could live with you, Susan. Gina, you really are a good person. Matt doesn't deserve you. Hey, Mom. Don't say unnecessary things. Moved by her sincere words, I was impressed. Gina, 6 years older than my son, was assertive and straightforward. But she was also caring and affable. She was positive about living together. And I had no worries about moving in with the young couple. At first, our household was harmonious, and there were no problems. However, that changed dramatically soon after we started living together. When Gina became pregnant, the whole family was delighted at that time. Due to her condition, Gina quit her part-time job and took on the role of a full-time homemaker. My son continued to work hard, and I supported them while still working myself. Finally, the grandchild was born, and we were all set to push forward together. That was when Matt's company, eager to globalize, established an overseas branch, requiring him to support it for several years. This timing for the overseas assignment made Matt terribly lonely. I want to stay in America. I still want to live with this child. He lamented as he left for abroad, and the three of us remained behind. Colleagues asked me, "Aren't you worried about living with just your daughter-in-law?" But I had no such concerns. With such a kind daughter-in-law and a cute grandchild, I felt I could keep going. Little did I know I would later regret this comfort. During her pregnancy, Gina suffered severe morning sickness and was unable to do any household chores. Fortunately, I lived with them, so I took on all the housework. However, that may have been a mistake. Even after the grandchild was born, Gina did not take care of the house at all. Moreover, there were many days when she would neglect the grandchild and go out to play. Unable to watch this any longer, I called her out to discuss the matter. "Gina, you've had a child, you know? Do you have any awareness as a mother?" That day, as Gina was about to leave the house and leave the grandchild with me, I stopped her at the entrance and brought her to the living room to try to talk. When you're not here, I'm looking after the child all the time. Yet, you won't even let me take a break? A break. You go out almost every night. I'm not a maid or a babysitter, you know? I know that. But it's depressing to hear nothing but crying all the time. Can't I have a little freedom? Gina said this with a laugh, which honestly irritated me. However, becoming emotional could further provoke her. It would be disastrous if she abandoned her parental duties. I had no face to show my son if I left everything to her. Things could not continue this way. I took a deep breath to calm myself, choosing my words carefully to make sure they reached her. Could you at least reduce how often you go out? I have work too. It's a problem if you go out every day. I tried to plead with her in the most humble way possible. But she started laughing off my request. Work. You're not doing anything serious, so please don't pretend it's hard. I'm tired from parenting. Since I'm living here, please be considerate. Later, it became clear that she did not understand my job. I had explained it at the time of the marriage. But she probably didn't grasp what being a certified public accountant entails. She might have thought it was just some clerical job that anyone could do. Her disdain became apparent during our conversation. Basically, the reason you can live here is thanks to Matt. So please try a bit harder. I don't have time to work. As if she was the one earning, her words made my eyebrows twitch. Our lifestyle was sustained by my son's income, or so she thought. All the living expenses earned by my son's income went into savings for the grandchild. Because I had refused to accept it. The day before he went abroad, my son and I had discussed it. I'll cover your living expenses too, Mom. Although my son had offered this, I refused out of gratitude for just living together. I took on all expenses, including the mortgage and necessary living costs. I was saving my son's money for the grandchild. However, telling Gina this might make her feel obliged. I had asked my son to keep this between us. So, to Gina, I must have seemed like a parasite. Living off my son without contributing anything to the household. Her attitude toward me grew increasingly arrogant day by day. As this situation continued, and my grandchild turned 3, I entered my 50s and began to feel my body decline. If this lifestyle continued, I might reach my limit. I was worried about what to do. When I heard that my son might be ending his overseas assignment soon. We'll see each other soon. Hang in there, Dad's working hard. During our daily video calls, my son would talk to the grandchild. The grandchild's growth was very slow, and at that time, he still had difficulty speaking. However, he would say words like Dada and express his love through gestures, which both my son and I found adorable. But beside me, Gina seemed disinterested, fiddling with her phone. It was hard to discuss this with Matt since he was overseas. And dealing with Gina had become a daily challenge. Then, an incident occurred. That day, I returned home late, too late to prepare dinner. Hoping against hope that Gina had managed something. I parked the car and immediately heard my grandchild's cries from outside. Rushing inside, I found laundry left undone. My grandchild, whose diaper had not been changed, was scratching his bottom and crying out for a change. Where was Gina? Looking around, I caught sight of her sleeping carelessly on the living room sofa. I couldn't believe she was sleeping while my grandchild cried so desperately. In contrast to the crying child, Gina was snoring loudly, sleeping soundly. Exhausted from work and daily stress, I decided to wake her up forcefully. Wake up! What are you doing? TCH, so noisy. Stop yelling right by my ear. Perhaps it was the way I removed the blanket she was under that made her click her tongue. Waking up cranky, Gina slowly sat up, scratching her hair and looking lethargic. Which only irritated me further, increasing my frustration. How can you sleep so carelessly when the child is crying? I'm tired too. Don't yell at me when I've just woken up. I can hear you, okay? Tired? What are you tired from? You don't do anything around the house. I am taking care of the child. Why do you act so high and mighty when you don't know anything? Gina's mood was at its worst, and she retorted, glaring at me as she spoke. Her attitude was unforgivable, and I clenched my fists in anger. I was about to retort further when my grandchild tugged at my pants, indicating that his diaper was uncomfortable. Remembering my role, I momentarily left Gina alone and attended to my grandchild. Sorry, I know it's itchy. I'll change it right now. While changing the diaper with a gentle tone, far different from how I spoke to Gina, I noticed that my grandchild continued to cry even after being cleaned. Wondering why, I remembered Gina had been asleep. Could it be that you haven't eaten either? Though I wasn't sure if my grandchild could understand, I asked anyway. Seemingly frustrated by his inability to speak, his crying didn't subside. But he gestured towards his stomach to show he was hungry. Furious over this unacceptable situation but holding back my anger, I quickly prepared some food. Once he began eating, my grandchild laughed innocently while watching TV and eating. Finally, I could relax. After settling down, I slumped over the table, utterly exhausted. Why should I have to endure this? It was all because she refused to take care of the house or the child properly. My forgotten anger resurfaced, exacerbated by Gina's voice overhead. Is this all for dinner tonight? It doesn't have any meat. Displeased by the fish-based dinner, Gina complained. Something inside me snapped, and I sternly told her to sit down. Sit down, we need to talk. Is this going to take long? I was about to go out. Just sit down. My raised voice startled Gina, visibly making her jump. Fortunately, my grandchild was too engrossed in the TV to notice our situation. Reluctantly sitting down amid complaints, Gina was met with my stern words. I'm not saying you can't go out or must always stay home. But lately, you've been far too indifferent towards the child. Indifferent? That's an exaggeration. I'm not ignoring him, and today I was just tired and took a nap. Tired from napping. It's because you keep going out at night that you don't have the energy during the day. Why do I have to be scolded just for sleeping a little? Do you know what time it is? It's already 9 p.m. This isn't just a nap. Well, I was asleep, what can I do about it? Initially, Gina listened quietly, but she gradually became irritated. Her tone shifted, and she glared at me defiantly. Do you even realize you're a mother? This child is your son, you know? Enough already. Reaching her limit, Gina stood up abruptly, grabbed my things, and thrust them at me while shouting insults. I've been wanting to say this, but I don't like anything about you. From now on, we'll live just as a family, so please leave this house. Don't get involved with us anymore. With that, Gina slammed the living room door and left. The noise startled my grandchild, who turned anxiously towards the door. Mama. Feeling lost without his mother, my grandchild walked over to me, looking up as if asking where his mother had gone. My heart ached at his look, and I couldn't hold back my tears as I hugged him. Why had it come to this? I thought I could support this home even without Matt. Now, I might have to leave this child with such a parent. What should I do? The pain and helplessness overwhelmed me, and I let the tears flow. Noticing my distress, my grandchild looked up worriedly and gently wiped my tears. "Grandma, there." With uncertain words, he wiped my tears and patted my head as if to comfort me. His earnest kindness was a small solace, but my tears flowed even more. Still, it's crucial that he lives a happy life. I can't leave him with such an unreliable person. I must protect him. Resolved, I decided to take steps I had hesitated on until now. The next day, I called in to take a day off from work and arranged to speak with Gina again. "What is it? If it's about yesterday, I've had enough. Can you please just leave soon?" Clearly loathing even speaking to me, Gina sighed heavily the moment she was called, and immediately started with provocative words as she sat down. "Understood. As you wish, I will leave. Finally realized you're a nuisance, huh?" It must have been unexpected for her that I accepted her words without argument. Gina looked momentarily surprised, then her expression faded into a sneer. "However, the house and everything are in my name, so let's change that." "Gladly. If that means cutting ties with you, let's do it right away." As a condition for leaving the house, I proposed a change of ownership. Unaware of the implications, Gina agreed eagerly with a cheerful nod. A smile unwittingly crossed my face as I heard her response. She was oblivious to the fact that this change of ownership would soon lead her into a dire situation. Taking the unsuspecting Gina, we went from the city office to insurance and the house mortgage, changing everything that was in my name to hers. Just as we completed all the changes, Matt returned home at the perfect time. Matt. Gina was surprised to see her husband. Naturally, as I had told her it would be a while before Matt returned to America. "It's been a while, Gina. Why are you here, Matt? What about the overseas branch? Didn't I tell you? I was about to return to America soon. Actually, I had confessed everything to Matt last night. His return was supposed to be later. But I was at my wit's end. I decided to give up pretending everything was okay and told him everything. Honestly, I thought even telling Matt might not help. But his boss at the overseas branch is a very kind person. After hearing about the troubles at home, he arranged everything from flights to bring him back immediately. Thanks to that, Matt returned to America while I was buying time with the name change. Before I could fully leave this house, we managed to meet face to face. "Gina, you've really done some terrible things to my mother and me." Gina must have realized from just one look that Matt was furious. Her body trembled noticeably as she looked up at him, clearly frightened. "What terrible things?" "I haven't done anything to your mother. Don't play dumb. I've heard all about it." Gina still tried to deceive her way out even now. A futile resistance. As I thought this, Matt seemed to speak on my behalf, looking down at her with a broad smile. Standing tall with his arms crossed, Matt had an imposing presence. "It's not like that. Your mother doesn't contribute financially to the house but keeps nagging. I just lost my temper because I'm tired from taking care of the child. It was just a slip of the tongue." Trying to get through this situation, Gina, probably terrified of Matt, let slip words she would probably regret, and by the time she finished, I was thoroughly exasperated. "Do you even realize on whose account our household is sustained?" After hearing Gina's story, Matt continued with a scoff. looking down on her as if he found her ignorance amusing. "Why are you laughing at me?" Gina looked bewildered, not understanding why she was being laughed at, and alternated her gaze between Matt and me. Our living expenses were covered by my mother's income. "What do you mean?" "I entrusted all my earnings to my mother to save for this child." As Matt began to reveal the course of events, Gina, hearing it for the first time, was visibly shaken. She probably had never imagined that she had been supported by me all this time. It was as if her face showed she realized she had committed a terrible mistake. "Why do you think you had to change everything into your name today?" "Huh?" Confused by Matt's sudden question. The situation only intensified as he pressed her further. "You thought you succeeded in getting my mother to leave, didn't you?" Hit with the truth, Gina found no words to return. Perhaps her reaction was also amusing, as Matt approached her with a malicious grin. "The person who's been patiently keeping our home together wouldn't just leave. Because of your harassment." "But then why?" "It was my instruction." Gina snapped back at his words, and Matt cut her off. "What? Why would you do something like that?" "Because, if I didn't make changing the name a condition for leaving, you might not have acted so readily." "Why would we need to change the name?" "Just drive out your mother, and we three can live here." Perhaps Gina still believed Matt was on her side. Both Matt and I were taken aback by her statement. And perhaps it was just too absurd for Matt, who burst into laughter, holding his stomach. "Come on, jokes should only be about your face. There's no way we'd continue living with you after driving my mother out." So, then why change the ownership to me?" "To get a divorce, of course." With that, Matt handed her the divorce papers. The papers practically slapped her face, causing her to stagger back in shock, barely managing to stand her ground. "After hearing all this, there's no way I can leave this child and my mother in your care. Nor is it remotely possible for me to continue as your husband." "Wait, this is too unreasonable." "Unreasonable? You're the one to talk. Look back at what you've done to my mother." Matt's anger erupted with the word unreasonable. He yelled at her, seemingly venting not only his anger but mine as well. "Trusting you even slightly to take care of my mother and child was my mistake. From now on, I'll protect them. Today marks the end for us. Even if we divorce, the money saved is mine." Realizing that begging further was futile, Gina shifted her strategy to cling to money. As discussions of divorce and asset division began, she demanded Matt's money. Disgusted by her behavior, I sighed deeply. "And do you know why I was paying the living expenses?" "There's another reason I did it." "Why did I cover the living expenses and save Matt's money in such a way?" "Huh? All the accounts under our grandchild's name were created by me." "What do you mean?" "I don't understand what you're saying." Uncomprehending, Gina responded as if she couldn't grasp the meaning. "In divorce proceedings, savings in a child's name can sometimes be considered part of the marital assets. To prevent this, I received the living expenses from Matt. And I saved it as a gift for our grandchild. I did this so that if something happened between us and we divorced, the grandchild's savings wouldn't end up being yours. And neither would Matt's past savings go to you. So, the money that would go to you is very limited." So that's it. I had not prepared for divorce per se. But the precautions I had taken proved incredibly useful. I could only praise myself for my foresight. Gina, who had fallen right into my trap, now crumbled to the floor in despair, her face reflecting the end of her world. "Too bad. You married Matt for the money, didn't you? As Gina hung her head in defeat, Matt wasn't about to let her off easy. So, that's not it? Huh? No, that's not it. But I've heard everything from your nightly playmate, your affair partner. Lies? Gina seemed to say, realizing that she was exposed to that extent. I sighed in exasperation. You didn't think I'd suspect why you were going out every night? I thoroughly investigated and captured solid evidence. If you want, the affair partner even confessed. Saying this, I showed her a voice recorder and several photos of her entering a hotel. And Gina, perhaps resigning herself to the reality, found herself unable to retort. It seems that after marrying Matt, she had reconnected with an old boyfriend. She started an affair with him and apparently had been giving him money. But unfortunately for you, all your schemes fell through. My salary isn't even close to what my mom earns. Your mother's job is just clerical, right? How could she possibly earn more than you, Matt? The income of a certified public accountant increases the more they advance in their career. If we're talking about mom's current income, it's around $100,000, isn't it? $100,000? Hearing about my income, Gina was visibly shocked. Regret your ignorance. My mom isn't someone you can look down on like that. But if I try. Gina. As Gina was about to retort with vehemence towards Matt, I couldn't stand watching her any longer and intervened between them. No matter how much you cry and wail, you can't overturn the facts anymore. Stop displaying such disgraceful behavior. It's just unsightly. After that, she bit her lower lip in frustration. Then she began pleading with Matt, crying not to divorce her. Perhaps thinking about how difficult it would be to find a job and support herself at 35 with no job experience. Desperately clinging to a straw, she cried to Matt. However, my family-oriented son would not allow that, declaring firmly, "I'll make sure you face the consequences." He refused her pleas and, as promised, filed for divorce mediation. Moreover, he went through with suing her for all the verbal abuse and neglect she had directed at our grandchild. Thanks to that, her life became a debt hell. With the house mortgage to repay, it seemed she had no choice but to declare bankruptcy. What became of her after that? I do not know, but rumors say she is now living on social welfare. Time has passed since then, and I am now 76 years old, living with my son and grandchild. This spring, my grandchild announced he was getting married. She's like Grandma, kind and strong-willed, he told me with a shy smile, showing how well he has grown. Watching him, I cried with my son, continuing to wish for their happiness. The front door won't open. I tried turning the key several times, but it still wouldn't unlock. Why? Feeling helpless, I sighed. Just then, the window above the front door on the second floor opened. It seems like you are having trouble. Mother. The front door won't unlock. It won't unlock because I changed the lock. My mother-in-law laughed loudly. Then, my father-in-law also peeked out from the window. You understand now, right? We don't need a daughter-in-law who doesn't do housework like you. With those words, I realized everything. Oh, I see. They locked me out, because they have been ignoring me for a long time and seem to really dislike me. Well, if that's the case, that's fine. But this is my house. There's no way I will let them kick me out and take over. If they are serious, then I am serious too. I've prepared, so get ready. Looking at my in-laws by the window, I took out my smartphone. My name is Angela Johnson. I run a company that provides various services, including housekeeping services. Running a company has been much harder than I thought. Being swamped with work every day, I missed out on marrying earlier. By the time I realized it, I was in my late 30s. However, because I was managing my company, I was able to meet Tom. Tom works at an advertising agency, and we met when I consulted him about advertising for my company. We shared interests, and it was fun talking to him. Thus, we quickly got married. 1.5 years ago, I got married, and I turned 38 this year. Tom is 3 years younger, at 35. Currently, we live with Tom's parents, and the 4 of us live together. I wish I could say it's all fine, but it's not a great story because Tom's parents are the worst. The first time I met Tom's parents was when I visited their house to introduce myself for marriage. Nervous, Tom told me. My parents are the worst, but I'll make sure we don't have to deal with them anymore. Just bear with it during the greeting. Tom said. I later learned that Tom doesn't get along well with his parents. Since getting a job, he has had little to do with them. At the time, I wondered why, but I understood the reason soon after meeting them. I'm Angela, dating Tom. I said and handed over a gift. Then, my mother-in-law scrutinized me. Oh. Quite an old lady, aren't you? I was shocked by Helen Johnson's words. Meanwhile, next to her, my father-in-law frowned. Really? Looks like she's past her prime, doesn't she? Ah, disappointing. I thought we were getting a younger bride. My in-laws sighed conspicuously. I was speechless. Indeed, I am not young. But even if they thought so, they shouldn't have said it. Yet, my in-laws spoke their minds without any concern for me. I couldn't believe what was happening and glanced at Tom. At that moment, Tom whispered to me. Sorry. I'll properly apologize later, but please just ignore it for now. Okay. I nodded, but it was not something I could easily dismiss. After that, my in-laws continued to freely criticize me. They said things like, there are prettier women, aren't there? And, why didn't you bring a younger bride? My in-laws blatantly disparaged me. Of course, I was boiling with anger. In the end, we left Tom's parents' house soon after. Then, I confronted Tom in a nearby cafe. What was that about? It's because of those two that I couldn't get married until this age. Tom began to explain, hanging his head. In the past, Tom had considered marrying several women. However, every time he introduced them to his parents demeaned them in the same way they did today, leading to fights and eventually the women breaking off the engagements. That's why I hate my parents too. I really want to cut ties with them. It's impossible to cut ties, right? I won't tell my parents our address after marriage, and I'll completely cut off contact. Please don't say we won't get married. Tom pleaded with tears in his eyes. From his demeanor, it was clear that Tom had been troubled by his parents for a long time. I agreed to marry him on the condition that he would have as little to do with his parents as possible. After that, Tom and I officially got married. After the marriage, we lived in my house. I have the money but seemed unlikely to marry, so I thought I might as well build the house I wanted. I built the house on a whim a few years ago, and I pay the monthly mortgage of $2,100. However, right after building the house, I met Tom. And then, we got married. If I knew it would turn out like this, I wouldn't have bought the house until I got married. I regret it a lot. But Tom said he liked my house. Angela, I think it's wonderful because it's filled with your thoughts. Of course, I was thrilled. Thus, our married life started in my house. Our married life was smooth sailing. I tend to neglect housework because of work. But whenever that happens, Tom always helps out without complaining. Work must have been tough, right? I've heated up the bath, so go take one. Tom would pamper me like that. There was no way our married life could go wrong. I'm so happy it's almost scary, I thought every day. But such a peaceful life came to an abrupt end. One day, when I returned home, I heard Tom's loud voice from the living room. Enough is enough. I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. When I rushed into the living room, Tom had just hung up the phone. What happened? Well, Tom's story went like this. These past few days, his parents had been contacting him frequently. The reason was to ask for money. Apparently, his father's company went bankrupt and they couldn't pay the rent. Could you lend us some money? If not, could we live with you for a while? Just for a little bit, was the gist. Of course, Tom had refused because he disliked his parents. I also definitely didn't want to live with my in-laws. I've refused, but they might resort to forceful measures, so be careful, Tom warned. I nodded. However, I had not given my in-laws our address. So, at most, they would keep calling. I was somewhat dismissive. But then, on a Sunday a few days later, past noon, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Hello. Who is it? When I answered, there were several movers standing there with large packages, and behind them were my in-laws. Come on, move out of the way. We can't move the stuff in otherwise. Saying this, my in-laws barged into the house. And just like that, in no time at all, their move was complete. What's going on here? We have no money, so we had no choice. That's not what I mean. How did you find out this address? Tom's question was met with silence from the in-laws. Later, I learned that they had followed Tom. His father had been waiting near Tom's workplace and simply followed him home from there to learn the address, then they moved in unilaterally. Though I was dumbfounded, once they moved in, it was indeed difficult to kick them out. Thus, we ended up living with my in-laws in a rather makeshift arrangement. Living with them was the worst. They did nothing but laze around the house all day. Re-employment is impossible at our age, my father-in-law said without a hint of shame. My mother-in-law was no different. I'm too old for housework, it's tough. She would excuse herself, pushing all shopping and cleaning onto us. If you're not going to work, at least help with the household chores, I pleaded in desperation, to which my mother-in-law frowned and complained. Household chores are the wife's job. I can't believe you'd make elderly people work like this. That's not what I mean. Oh, be quiet. You skip on your chores too. I was on the verge of exploding with frustration. Yet, they were Tom's parents, so I endured considerably. However, my patience only emboldened my in-laws. Not long after we started living together, I noticed one of my designer bags was missing. Huh. I'm sure I left it here. No matter where I searched, I couldn't find it. Just in case, I peeked into my in-laws' room when they were out. I only glanced from the doorway, but I found what I was looking for. Huh. That's my bag. Turns out, my mother-in-law had taken it without permission. And that wasn't all. She had also taken several of my handkerchiefs and accessories. When I confronted her, she said to me, Huh? I just borrowed them. Or should I have sold them instead? Tom scolded her harshly for this. But in front of Tom, she pretended to cry and apologize. We made her promise that if she did anything like this again, she would have to leave, and we decided to let it go this time. However, this incident soured my relationship with my in-laws completely. Even though we lived in the same house, they started ignoring everything I said. Yet, perhaps afraid of being kicked out, my mother-in-law stopped rummaging through my things. Well, if being ignored is all it is, I decided not to care anymore. A year passed like this. Throughout, my in-laws continued to ignore me, and I ignored them in return. This strange relationship continued until one day when I came home and tried to unlock the door as usual. I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The front door won't unlock. I tried turning the key several times, but it still wouldn't unlock. Why won't it? Feeling helpless, I sighed. Just then, the window above the front door on the second floor opened. It seems like you are having trouble. Mother. The front door won't unlock. It won't unlock because I changed the lock. My mother-in-law laughed loudly. Then, my father-in-law also peeked out from the window. You understand now, right? We don't need a daughter-in-law who doesn't do housework like you. With those words, I realized everything. Oh, I see. They locked me out, because they have been ignoring me for a long time and seem to really dislike me. Well, if that's the case, that's fine. But this is my house. There's no way I will let them kick me out and take over. If they are serious, then I am serious too. I've prepared, so get ready. Looking at my in-laws by the window, I took out my smartphone. Watching me, my mother-in-law taunted me. Tom will remarry a younger woman. A young, capable wife who listens to me, right? Are you planning to divorce us? Don't you understand? It seems your brain has aged quite a bit too. My mother-in-law laughed exaggeratedly, with my father-in-law laughing beside her. I gritted my teeth in real anger. I sent an email to Tom in a fury. Then, after glaring at my in-laws, I pointed at them and made a clear threat. If you touch my belongings again, I'll sue you both for theft. Just as I said this, my father-in-law threw something. I don't need this crap. Take it. What fell at my feet was my clothing. I quickly picked it up. If you mess with my stuff again, I will take you to court. Be prepared. Huh? I can't hear you? That's why. As I began to say more, my mother-in-law raised her voice. Be quiet. Just go somewhere else. Given the situation, I decided it was best not to cause any more trouble for the neighbors. I picked up the clothes my father-in-law had thrown and left. Holding my belongings, I got into a taxi and headed to my office, which is located near my company. This office, a regular apartment room, is a place I use personally. I often stay there when work runs late, and now, it's also where I keep many of my personal belongings. Since my mother-in-law rummaged through my designer items, I had moved all important things to this office. So, even if my home was searched, I wouldn't have much trouble now. Still, that doesn't mean they can do whatever they want with my house. I said loudly, trying to motivate myself. At that moment, Tom called. Tom? Did you read my email? Yeah, I did. Are you okay, Angela? Yes, for now. Listen. I explained to Tom everything I had been thinking about on my way to the office. First off, we should sell the house currently occupied by his parents. Then, we'll look for a new place to live. Right now, his parents rely entirely on us, but it seems they plan to depend solely on Tom in the future. If I can pull Tom to my side, his parents will lose their lifeline. Once they run out of money and can't sustain their lifestyle, maybe they'll start to reflect on their actions. That was my thought. I've really reached my limit. This time, I'm completely cutting ties with those two. Tom seemed quite angry. If that's the case, this might actually work. Convinced of this, I immediately began the process of selling the house. The real estate registration information was kept in my office. Anticipating such an event, I had moved it there first when my mother-in-law rummaged through our things. Therefore, the sale of the house could proceed smoothly. However, the house was still under mortgage. I hoped it wouldn't end up in a negative equity situation. That was my only concern. It turned out to be an underloan situation. The sale price of the house exceeded the remaining mortgage debt. Of course, there would be capital gains tax. But there are tax exemptions available, so I consulted the tax accountant I always rely on for work. Thus, I successfully completed the sale of the house. Moreover, it only took a week to sell. Since I knew a real estate agent, we were able to sell the house faster than usual. Meanwhile, my in-laws, oblivious to this, made a carefree call after the sale was finalized. Tom hasn't come back home. You didn't say anything unnecessary, did you? Anything unnecessary? Since Tom and I are a couple, I spoke openly and truthfully. As a result, the only reason Tom isn't going there is because of them. When I pointed this out, my mother-in-law suddenly got angry. It's your fault. What are we supposed to do now? We're struggling without any money. Isn't that a result of your own actions? Huh? It's your fault. Send us money right away. I was speechless. They kicked themselves out, and now they were demanding money. If they need money, they should just work. Do they not understand their own situation? I had no words to return. Then, my mother-in-law raised her voice even louder. Are you listening? It's your fault Tom isn't coming home. As I said, that's your fault, Mother. Don't joke with me. It's your fault. Send us money right away. Do you understand? At that point, I was really fed up and hung up the phone before my mother-in-law could finish. I immediately blocked her number. There, that should do it. I decided to prepare for my next move. It was about 2 weeks after Helen Johnson's call. Thanks to blocking her, my phone hadn't rung. But Tom's phone was constantly ringing, with a troubling number of calls. He was clearly distressed. Really, they reap what they sow, but what are they thinking? What are they saying? It's all about money. They don't care about us, Angela or me at all. Tom spoke in a dismayed tone. I could only sigh. Currently, we are living in the apartment that I had used as an office. So, we can sleep and wake up normally, and we aren't really struggling with anything. However, my in-laws shouldn't know that. I think I should still be concerned about Tom. That's what parental affection is supposed to be. But it seems my in-laws only have money on their minds. It looks like I need to take some swift action. I picked up my smartphone. I contacted the real estate agent who had handled the sale of our house and arranged for them to evict my in-laws the next day. It might sound harsh, but actually, the agent would just talk to them. Since the house was sold, it's only natural they should move out. That's all that would be communicated. The next day, I went to the house with Robert, the real estate agent. He brought several burly male employees with him, all imposing figures. Being confronted by these men would be intimidating. I felt a bit sorry for my in-laws. But sympathy is forbidden here. I stayed hidden and watched Helen Johnson's reaction. Soon, Robert rang the doorbell, and my mother-in-law appeared. Who is it? Hello, I'm Robert from the real estate agency. A real estate agent. We have no business with such. My mother-in-law shouted in her usual manner. But Robert remained calm. I'm sorry, but we've purchased this property. Could you please leave immediately? What? This is my son's house. You're talking nonsense. My mother-in-law stamped her foot. Robert calmly asked again. Your son? May I know his name? Tom Johnson. Do you understand? Unfortunately, that's not correct. The property was in Angela Johnson's name. Robert's words caught Helen Johnson off guard. She suddenly lost her momentum. Ah, Angela. That's the daughter-in-law. Yes, the daughter-in-law. Regardless, she sold the property. What? Wait a minute. Honey. My mother-in-law screamed into the house. Then, my father-in-law appeared. Afterward, the in-laws began complaining together. This couldn't be the daughter-in-law's house. A daughter-in-law who can't even do housework, a useless woman, couldn't possibly have the money to buy a house. They disparaged me unilaterally. I couldn't take it anymore. That's when several of Robert's male employees stepped forward. Using force would be problematic for both sides, wouldn't it? Of course, forcing them out wasn't an option. Robert had no intention of doing such a thing. But the mere presence of strong men made one imagine being forcibly evicted. That's human nature. It seemed my in-laws imagined it too. Will you please leave? That is, well. My mother-in-law fidgeted. And you, sir? What do you think? No, because, that is. My father-in-law mumbled and trailed off. At this point, Robert sighed and said, "Shall we go to court then? For an eviction?" With that statement, my in-laws signed a document agreeing to vacate. After the conversation concluded, I showed my face. My mother-in-law's face turned red with rage as she began shouting. "It's your doing. What are we supposed to do now? We have nowhere to live. That's not my concern. You drove me out, remember? Mark my words. I'll get back at you for this." With those final words, my mother-in-law slammed the door. The in-laws moved out the following day, which I learned through a call from Robert. Although we lost the house, I was glad we could get back at my in-laws. I reported this to Tom when he came home. Then, Tom said something unexpected. "Then, I'll build a house next time." Apparently, Tom had always planned to build a house after getting married and had been saving up for it. But when we decided to marry, I had already built a house to my liking. So, he thought he'd use the saved money for our retirement instead. But with this incident, I had to sell the house. So now Tom thought it was his turn. Really? That's wonderful. It won't compare to the house Angela built, but it will be big enough for 2 people to live comfortably. Wait. 3 people, right? I gently placed my hand on my stomach. What? Could it be a baby? Yes. I went to the hospital today. Just a few hours before this conversation, I had visited the local obstetrics and gynecology clinic. The examination confirmed that I was pregnant, which I also shared with Tom. Tom was overjoyed, and we were at the peak of happiness. A few days later, I received a strange call. The caller was an unknown number, and I had a bad feeling. The phone rang persistently, so I reluctantly answered. "Hello? Is this Angela Johnson?" It was a man's deep voice. Honestly, my heart skipped a beat. "Yes, that's me. What can I do for you?" "I run a staffing company, my name is John, and..." Despite my fear, John spoke very politely. He explained that his staffing company had an office nearby. Apparently, there had been a commotion in front of his office a few hours ago. This company is run by fraudsters. The worst person who abandons their parents is the president. 2 men and women were causing a scene like this. Of course, the staff quickly restrained the 2. Then, John had asked them, "Why are you doing this to me? What grudge do you have against me?" The frightened man and woman froze completely. They couldn't speak and just trembled. Eventually, the contact information they provided was my cell phone number. Could it be that those were my in-laws? They said their names were Dan Johnson and Helen Johnson. Aren't they your parents? Oh, those are my in-laws. Actually, I explained how they had unilaterally changed the locks to my house and kicked me out. Meanwhile, John told me that my in-laws had some old company documents of mine when they were caught. It seems John's office is located where my company used to be. Essentially, my in-laws mistook my company for John's and did this out of spite because I had kicked them out. Suddenly, John became angry. "What? You just let that happen?" "No, that's why I kicked them out of the house." "That's too forgiving, I can't believe it." Thinking about it, he might be right. But I think going further would be too much. That's why I decided to end this retaliation when my in-laws lost their house. However, John wasn't satisfied. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I'll make those two take responsibility for this. Is that all right?" "That's fine, but what do you plan to do?" "I'll have them work here. Even if I claim damages, they won't be able to pay, so they'll just have to earn it." In essence, John was offering my in-laws a live-in job. That was more than I could have hoped for. I eagerly agreed. Later, through John's mediation, my in-laws were sent to work at a construction site in the countryside, where they lived on the premises. It was a completely legal job at a regular construction site, but because they lived there, they couldn't escape or slack off. Now that they had a place to live and a way to earn money, my in-laws should be grateful. 6 months after my in-laws disappeared, I gave birth to a healthy boy. Now, Tom, my son, and I live a lively life. We are also discussing the house with Tom, planning to design it with all my dreams in mind. Thinking about it, the house I built had neither a child's room nor a room for my husband. Being able to decide on the layout of the house while talking with the person I love is truly a blessing. Cherishing this happiness, I wait for Tom and my son to come home today. Next month, you'll meet the 10th grandchild. As I looked over, I noticed her belly had grown, and Mandy was happily stroking it. The small room was crowded with 4 children and 9 grandchildren. I hadn't noticed how far along she was. "What?" I exclaimed, overwhelmed by surprise, joy, and a daunting unease all at once. "Oh, my goodness. I haven't seen you for about a year, so I missed telling you. It's a boy. Live a long life, Grandma." "Yes, I hope so." Everyone present rejoiced and celebrated the happy news. Amid the exchange of heartfelt words, I couldn't fully suppress my complex feelings. In fact, my eldest son, Scott, had been continuously taking money from me, and my savings were depleted. Daily life had become a struggle. I wished I could give Mandy a present for the baby, but I could no longer afford it. I never expected to feel so miserable at such a joyful occasion. I felt so pathetic that I might cry. Alone, I quietly left the room and went upstairs. As I did, Scott's slightly open door caught my eye. What state was his room in now? As I slowly opened the door, the mess inside was revealed. Why had it come to this? Standing there in shock, tears finally rolled down my cheeks. Then, I heard someone coming up the stairs heavily. Seeing who it was, various thoughts raced through my mind, leading to one inevitable conclusion I must avoid at all costs. In a moment of desperation, I jumped from the balcony. My name is Kathy Morris. I'm a widow in my 60s, having lost my husband several years ago. Even after the 2nd and 3rd anniversaries of his death, I remained downhearted. However, I decided I couldn't go on like this and started a part-time job at a supermarket on the recommendation of a close friend. Now, working there brings excitement to my days. Welcome. I enjoy making small talk with customers at the register. "Today, the fish is cheap," I say, which immediately eases the atmosphere, especially with busy mothers. A man in work clothes, looking to be in his mid to late 30s with a sunburned face, reminds me of my son Scott. I have 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Raising them was hard, but I managed to get all 4 through college. My second son and daughters have found wonderful partners and are now married, blessed with children and busy lives. Only Scott, my eldest, has no desire to marry and still lives with me. Perhaps because he is the eldest, he is very caring. He helps with things I don't understand, like internet and smartphone settings. He also likes to spend money on his hobbies. Hence, his salary and bonuses often vanish on fishing gear. I bought another new reel. He opens the package that arrived today, looking pleased, and gazes at the tools inside. It's fine to spend on hobbies, but are you saving properly? I am. I've even started some investment funds. I was relieved to learn that he was managing his finances well, contributing to household expenses. Are you going fishing at the seaside this weekend? Yes, I'll be going. His face and arms tanned from outdoor activities. It was clear he enjoyed spending days out with friends, healthy and happy. Just be careful not to fall into the sea. I know. Scott checked his new fishing gear with sparkling eyes. His demeanor was like a child treasuring his toys. Beside him, I glanced at my diary. The first Sunday of last month was my birthday. My married children and grandchildren came over for a birthday party, an annual tradition they insist on continuing, especially my youngest daughter, Mandy. It's only once a year, why not, Mom? She would say, rallying her siblings. This year, the grandchildren even performed a pop the balloon act. With 9 grandchildren, the house felt a bit cramped, but such gatherings were rare. Despite the occasional complaints, having a large family was a source of joy and happiness. After each birthday, I immediately looked forward to the next. At my age, I still look forward to birthdays. Silly me. I chuckled to myself, feeling at the peak of happiness at that moment. In the midst of these cherished days, the unexpected happened. It was an early spring day, still marked by cold rain. When I returned home from work, Scott was sitting in the dark living room, muttering to himself. Scott? What's wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. It's his fault. Sensing his distress, I quickly turned on the lights and made him hot cocoa. Under the bright light, Scott looked drenched and pale, a far cry from his usual energetic self. Over time, he revealed that he had been laid off. My boss tricked me. It was actually his mistake, but they blamed me. But can't you apologize and start over? It's no use. It was a big project, and they said it's irreversible. That's terrible. I can't trust anyone anymore. Hearing him sob, I couldn't reprimand him. It was the first time I had seen Scott so dejected, betrayed by a trusted supervisor. How could I possibly understand his feelings? I suggested that Scott take a warm bath for now. After that, he ate a little dinner and then quickly retreated to his bed in his room. It was a complete turnaround for him, who had always been positive about his hobbies and work. From the next day on, he mostly stayed shut in his room. Perhaps in shock, he spent his days listlessly without looking for a job, and he even stopped going fishing. In a corner of the living room, the empty boxes from when he bought his fishing gear were carelessly thrown away. Could it be that he would remain shut in forever? I never imagined that the active Scott could become a recluse. No way, that can't be. However, my fears were realized, and gradually he stopped coming out of his room. I tried calling out to him through his door, but all I got back were gruff words. I can't trust anyone anymore. I don't want to work. But, at least you should go outside a little. Leave me alone. After that, he stopped responding. During the time Scott was shut in, I continued to work part-time. Being at work was a relief. Chatting with my colleagues and having casual conversations with customers was healing. However, the time to clock out and return home was the most depressing. I walked home, shoulders slumped, feeling urgent and helpless about Scott's recovery. Each day, seeing the man in work clothes who came to buy lunch brought me an indescribable sadness. What should I do? I had never imagined that my own son, a grown adult, would become a recluse. Not knowing who to turn to, I was at a loss. I considered talking to his siblings, but I didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. They had their own families. It didn't seem right to burden them with Scott's issues. Scott, are you there? I tried to do something, so I called out to his door upstairs. Come on down and eat something at least. However, no matter how long I waited, there was no response. Today's dinner is lasagna. Hey. Just then, a dull thud sounded. Scott had hit the wall. Startled, I shivered and stared at the door. Maybe he wanted to be left alone. I didn't understand, but I must have upset him in some way. Scott, I'll leave the lasagna on the living room table. Warm it up and eat later, I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking, and then I went downstairs. I hoped that he would return to his old self. A few days later, on my day off, Scott came out of his room. His hair was unkempt, and he had grown a scruffy beard, giving his face an unclean look. Dressed in pajamas, he rummaged through the fridge and grabbed 3 cans of beer, then went back to his room. I wondered if he was drinking every day like this, and I knocked on his door during lunch and dinner. You need to eat something nutritious. Shut up. You don't understand how I feel. Don't just drink. Why don't you go fishing like before? So you don't like how I am now? That's not it, I just want the old Scott back. Before I could finish, Scott came out of his room. Fine, I'll go out. Are you happy now? With that, he stormed out of the house, still in his pajamas, without telling me where he was going. What should I do now? Alone in the living room, all I could do was mutter to myself. If my husband were still alive, what would he have said? Looking at his photo on the altar, I sought help, but there was no reply. This mood must have shown at work because one day, even the manager asked me if I was all right, noting my gloomy expression. Not wanting to cause any trouble, I forced a smile and answered. I'm fine. It's just some trouble at home. Just a little. I told myself and got through another day of work. Mandy, who had gotten married and had children, still checked on me from time to time. On her days off, she would bring her daughter Ashley to visit. However, since Scott became reclusive, we started meeting outside. I didn't want her to see the mess in the house. Mandy didn't seem to mind at first, but by the 4th time, she must have sensed something. She lured me out to a restaurant at the aquarium during a break. Mom, is something wrong? We've been meeting outside a lot lately. Oh, is that so? But Ashley is having fun, right? Ashley happily played with a killer whale plushie I had bought her. Is your brother doing well? He's not troubling you by going fishing all the time, right? Not at all. He's going fishing every week. It's proof he's well. In reality, he wasn't going fishing at all, but was either lazing in his room or going to the casino. Though he used to manage his money well, lately he had been spending it on casino and lottery tickets. As long as he's fine, she said, sipping her coffee frappe. The sun was warm enough to make you sweat slightly, signaling the end of winter. Watching my daughter and granddaughter, I truly wished this moment could last forever. But, unfortunately, reality worsened. Give me some money, Mom. When I returned home, Scott demanded irritably. What? What do you need it for? Gambling. I went because there's a new slot machine, but I lost big. I need to go again. Stop it, no more gambling. Hurry up and give me the money. I need it for my revenge. No sooner had he said this than he snatched my bag, pulled out some bills from my wallet, and dashed out like the wind. It all happened in an instant, and I was speechless. It was only later that I felt truly frightened. My bag and the ransacked wallet lay miserably discarded in the hallway. I collapsed, weakened by the ordeal. Why has it come to this? Will I never see the vibrant Scott again? Am I doomed to spend my days with him as he continues to decline? With this sense of despair, the days just kept passing by. Scott's outings became more frequent, and the amount of money he demanded increased. Money had been taken from my wallet without me noticing. I could no longer leave my wallet at home with peace of mind. It seemed like a good opportunity to use electronic payments, which I had learned about from my cashier job, and I no longer carried cash. I was initially pleased since I could also accumulate points, but once Scott found out I wasn't carrying cash, he got angry and started throwing a fit. Why not? It's just some pocket money. Why don't you get a job for once? Stop joking. Give me the money. He constantly begged me for money and spent it all on gambling. When he ran out, he would demand more and shout at me. I was constantly afraid that he might eventually resort to violence. Exhausted, I lost the energy to meet with my children. I gradually stopped seeing Mandy and Ashley, using my busy schedule as an excuse. This situation continued for about a year until I was completely worn out, and then Mandy contacted me. Hey, isn't it almost your birthday? Let's all get together next month on Sunday. Mandy mentioned that the grandchildren were preparing a surprise this year. Looking at the calendar, the annual birthday celebration was just around the corner. I hadn't even realized it. Given Scott's current situation and my own state, I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. Honestly, I wanted to decline. But contrary to my true feelings, I felt a sudden lift in my spirits. The thought of my children and grandchildren wanting to celebrate was delightful. Once a year, on that day, I too wanted to spend time lively and happily. Yes, thank you. I'll keep that day free. I hadn't said a word to them about Scott. As long as I keep quiet and Scott doesn't meet anyone, they won't know. They won't have to worry. With that thought, I decided to pretend that everything was fine with Scott on the day of the birthday celebration. Scott and I are living a happy life as usual. I'll just say that. I murmured to myself in a place where Scott wasn't around. After Mandy's call, I began to clean the house little by little. It would be troublesome if this room, where more than 10 people would gather, had no place to stand. I threw out the dusty cardboard boxes from online shopping and put the bundle of used lottery tickets into a black garbage bag to be disposed of on Burnable Trash Day. I vacuumed while Scott was out since he would yell if he heard the noise. I cleaned carefully until the birthday party. Then the day arrived. The weather was clear and calm. About an hour before the children and grandchildren were to arrive, Scott left the house. As soon as he learned about the birthday party, he shouted, "Cancel it, it's too noisy." I told you to cancel it, but everyone has already arranged their schedules. That's ridiculous. He rampaged in his room for a while. Then, just a moment ago, after extorting some money from me, he disappeared to the casino. I felt a slight relief. Now Scott and the other siblings wouldn't have to meet. All that was left was to wait for everyone to gather. Soon after Scott left, the children and grandchildren started arriving one by one. As they all wished me happy birthday, my heart filled with joy. Each of the 9 grandchildren shyly celebrated with me. Seeing their innocent faces, I felt a complex emotion. Was I pretending to be happy for these children? That thought suddenly crossed my mind. It's okay, it's just for today. I told myself, fighting against this small guilt. The birthday party started immediately. Everyone brought dishes like finger food, salad sets, chicken, and pizza. The last item Mandy brought was a birthday cake, which the grandchildren had spent time making. The cake was topped with lots of chocolate, strawberries, and blueberries. On a piece of chocolate in the center, it read, "Happy birthday, Grandma Kathy." The writing was so squiggly that it was just barely readable, adding to its charm. The warmth of their handmade effort touched my heart. How wonderful! Thank you, everyone. I hugged each grandchild one by one. I was overjoyed that they had all made such an effort. Lastly, I hugged Ashley tightly. Thank you, Ashley. Ashley put the strawberries on. Her lisping words filled my heart, and I hugged her again. Mom, listen. Mandy began, standing beside Ashley. When I looked, I noticed her belly had swelled, and she was happily stroking it. Next month, you'll meet the 10th grandchild. The room was crowded, and I hadn't noticed. She was already in her final month. What? Surprise, joy, and an overwhelming anxiety all rushed in at once. Oh, my goodness. I haven't seen you for about a year, so I missed telling you. It's a boy. Live a long life, Grandma. Yes, I will. Ashley hugged me around the neck, and everyone in the room celebrated the happy news. Congratulations, the family is growing, I'll send a gift. Everyone exchanged words as they pleased. However, deep down, I couldn't suppress my complex emotions. In truth, Scott had been taking money from me continuously, and my savings were depleted. My daily life had also become a struggle. I wanted to give Mandy a gift if possible, but I could no longer afford it. I hadn't expected to feel so miserable at such a joyful and fun occasion. Amid the celebratory mood, I quietly left the scene alone. I felt so pathetic that I might cry. Pretending to go to the bathroom, I went upstairs. Suddenly, Scott's room, with the door half open, caught my eye. What state was his room in now? I slowly opened the door. The room, with the curtains drawn, was dim. Empty beer cans and plastic bottles were tossed on the floor. Scraps of lottery tickets and betting slips were scattered around. Fishing magazines lay around as they were read. The business bag was ripped to shreds and stuffed in the trash can. The fishing rods and other equipment were pushed into a corner, covered in dust. I stood there, dumbfounded, in the ruined room. Why had it come to this? The tears I had been holding back rolled down my cheek. Then, I heard heavy footsteps from downstairs, and someone was coming up. I turned around in shock, and there was Scott, looking irritated with a sinister gleam in his eyes. He said in a low, growling voice, "I lost at casino. I'm going back, so give me some money. Come on, enough is enough. Just give me the money. I don't have any on me right now. The grandchildren are here today, too, so please be quiet." "So you have money for the grandchildren, but not for me? I don't even have enough to give to the grandchildren." "Really? Liar. Am I just a nuisance to you?" Scott flew into a rage and advanced on me. "Stop. I also want to give a gift to my new grandchild, but I can't, and it's frustrating. Isn't your own son more important to you?" I slipped past Scott and ran away. I found an empty room, the one where I usually hang the laundry, and entered. Looking back, I saw Scott with bloodshot eyes, flailing his arms as he chased after me. "Money. Give me the money." I stepped out onto the balcony. If Scott hit me and I fell badly, who knows what could happen. If it led to a serious injury, Scott might end up being arrested. This could seriously hinder his chances of reintegration into society. It would hurt and upset the remaining children and grandchildren. That was absolutely unacceptable. In a split second, I jumped off the balcony. From the second floor, I might just get away with a fracture. If that's all it took to escape from Scott, it was a small price to pay. I fell headfirst and crashed into the ground. My vision flashed red, then blue, then dark. A tremendous shock went through my body, and for a moment, I felt nothing. The children must have heard something because they started screaming. The grandchildren began to cry, and the scene turned chaotic. From the balcony, I caught a glimpse of Scott peering down. He looked shaken and frightened as he saw me lying in the yard. Then he clasped his head and screamed. His siblings also heard his scream. I don't remember much after that. The sounds of Scott's cries, filled with regret or sorrow, echoed distantly. When I woke up, I was staring at the ceiling of a hospital room. The doctor told me I had severe injuries that would take 6 months to heal. The doctor also scolded me heavily for jumping off the balcony. I had broken my right leg and right wrist, and I would need rehabilitation. Naturally, the children and grandchildren were shocked. They took turns visiting me in the hospital, relieved that I was safe. Though it wasn't without consequences, my life was spared, and everyone was relieved. Mandy thought her heart would stop when she visited me in the hospital. When she saw me, she burst into tears of joy. "Really, stop doing things like this, Mom. I'm sorry." That day on the balcony, Scott had confessed everything to his siblings. Because of that, they became aware of our financial situation and the struggles we were facing. "You should have told us if you were in trouble. I didn't want to worry you. It would have been better to worry us than for things to come to this." She said this, crying in front of Ashley. The children learned about mine and Scott's situation and started to help us financially and in everyday life. They sympathized with Scott being laid off but were critical of his subsequent actions. Scott also began to deeply reflect on his behavior. He struggled to find a new job and was lucky to receive an offer from a small real estate company. After securing a job, he started visiting me in the hospital. He entered the room timidly, shrinking in guilt. "Mom, I'm sorry for causing you trouble." His hair was neatly groomed, and he had cleanly shaved his stubble. Dressed in a crisp suit and tie, he looked ready to make a fresh start. He appeared slightly brighter, which surprised me. People can change, can't they? Don't get all sentimental on me. But how did you change so suddenly? He hesitated for a moment, then looked down sheepishly and said, "That day, you tried to escape from me by jumping off the balcony." "Yes, I thought it was the only thing I could do at that moment. As I watched you disappear from the balcony, I remembered everything I had done in an instant." A tear formed in the corner of his eye. That's when I realized what I had done. It must have been a shocking sight for my son. Though it was an extreme form of intervention, it was a risky choice. "I'm sorry, I won't do that again. That's my line. I'll take good care of you, Mom, don't leave me behind." True to his word, he changed his ways and returned to the vibrant person he was before the layoff. My injuries healed well, and after being discharged from the hospital, I continued to live with Scott. I no longer intend to reprimand him. As the saying goes, misfortune turned into a blessing. Both he and I were better off. Later, surrounded by my children and grandchildren, we celebrated my discharge from the hospital. "This time, we'll celebrate grandly." So said Mandy, rallying her siblings. By the time I was discharged, Mandy's baby had been born, and the number of grandchildren had increased to 10. The chubby little hands of the baby boy were adorable. All I hope is that they live healthy, happy, and prosperously.